Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to the 30th day of Humanity Rising. Every day since the 22nd of May, between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European Time, we've been providing essentially an open space for people from all over the world and all over the professional spectrum to come together to share their experiences of the pandemic, how we're navigating through this extraordinary moment in our history. We're all under some form of lockdown. We're all engaging in social distancing, and we're all in a deep inquiry as to how we're going to shape the world beyond this pandemic. And the purpose of Humanity Rising is to provide a global commons so that people of goodwill can come together in a concerted way to ensure that the post-pandemic world is more sustainable and resilient and abundant and healthy and in alignment with natural systems. One of the most consistent themes of the last 30 days, and we've heard from people from everywhere, has been the importance of human solidarity and the importance of heart coherence. It's been really amazing. You may remember that we started with a invocation to the ancestors by Apila, Colorado, and then a meditation of heart coherence with Banafsheh Sayad. And then we ended the opening session with another heart coherence meditation with Sheva Carr. And it's a theme that keeps coming up. And yesterday, in fact, one of the speakers, Epi Ludwig, who's the CEO of Crowdsourcing Week in Singapore, made an extraordinary statement. He said that the problem of the human heart is at the heart of the human problem. And that statement galvanized the session yesterday in a very profound way. And I think it's a good introduction to the session that we're going to have today, which is about heart coherence. You know, if you think of one thing that unites all of humanity, it's the fact that we all have beating hearts, and our hearts are critical, foundational to both our personal health, our emotional relationships, and how we feel and know the world. And an increasing body of research is affirming what the ancients have known from the very beginning of time, that our attention to our hearts is perhaps the most important orientation that a person can have in terms of well-being, both internally and externally. So we're very privileged today to have Dr. Rollin McCraty with us. He's a biophysiologist. He's been studying for many decades the relationship between our emotions and our physiology. He's the director of research at the HeartMath Institute, which, as most of you know, has been, I would say, a prime mover and pioneer in the science of heart coherence. And we're going to play a short video, and then Dr. McCraty will speak to us about the research that he and others have been conducting. Then we'll have a question and answer period. If you have any questions for Rollin, you can put them in the chat or the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take note of those. And then we'll bring them into the conversation for 15 minutes or so. And then I'll introduce Claudia Wells, the chair of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and Teresa Collins, who works with the physicist Nassim Haramein in his Resonance Science Academy. They are the co-founders of the Heart Coherence Initiative, and each month they have a Heart Coherence Pulse, which we've been supporting, which brings people together from around the world to simply spend time once a month on beating our hearts in coherence together. So this session is about our hearts. It's about your heart, all of our hearts, at a moment in history when many of our hearts are breaking because of what's happening in the world. It's not only the pandemic, it's runaway climate change. It's massive and accelerating species extinctions. It's the despoilation of the environment in every conceivable place, in every conceivable way. So if you attune with your heart right now, you'll probably feel grief and deep sadness and all kinds of emotions that emanate through and with and from the heart. And our challenge at this moment as humanity is to find the pathway back to that inner sanctum of our hearts that knows it's one with all being. Because it's in that place that we feel the harmony of the spheres. We feel the love of the infinite. And we feel deep empathy with all sentient beings. It's all in the heart. So now we'll play the video, and then Dr. McCraty will start our program. Thank you, everyone.
We've all felt at one point or another we are interconnected. But is this an illusion or a scientific reality? After conducting years of experiments, researchers at the HeartMath Institute have discovered what they describe as heart coherence. Coherence is an optimal state in which the mind and emotions are brought into alignment and in sync with the heart's intuitive guidance. Practicing the state of coherence creates a cascade of neural and biochemical events that benefit the entire body, especially our mental and emotional stability. The human heart generates a magnetic field that can be measured outside of the body. The vibrational pattern of that field changes based on our attitudes, emotions, and intentions, and can affect the mental and emotional states of others around us. Our Earth is constantly bathed in electromagnetic fields. These fields affect and connect every living organism on the planet, human beings included. We are not only all swimming in a common vibrational field, but each of us are contributing our own positive or negative vibrations to the field, based on our thoughts, feelings, and interactions. And when you are in coherence, your heart resonates in the same frequency range as the Earth's magnetic field. When a group of people are in coherence together, this effect is magnified. Could large numbers of people synchronized in heart coherence generate a more coherent global field that can benefit others and help offset worldwide fear and incoherence? This is the pursuit of the Global Coherence Initiative, A global network of ultra-sensitive magnetic field detectors and other scientific instruments have been installed around the planet, measuring fluctuations in the field, creating one of the world's largest experiments for intentionally evolving human consciousness. By joining the initiative, you will practice methods that are helpful for increasing your personal well-being and energy levels, reducing stress, fear, and anxiety, while connecting you with your heart's deeper guidance for choices and decisions. At the same time, you'll be helping to shape the collective field of our planet for the better. As a participant, you will learn how to measure your coherence level in real time, along with hundreds of thousands of people in over 150 countries who are adding heart energy to the planet. We're at a point in the history of consciousness where we have an opportunity to make an evolutionary leap to a more cooperative and compassionate way of being. It's time to feed the field with more love and care for each other. Welcome to the Global Coherence Initiative. Download the Global Coherence app now on the App Store.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Rollin McCraty, and Jim, thank you for such a wonderful introduction and prelude to today. I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll get started. So I would like to discuss some of our more recent work out of the past 30 years on what I call the science of global coherence. And I can't say how many times I've either said myself or heard somebody saying, well, on some level, we're all connected. These, I think, it's so ubiquitous in our language. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of the ways we're able to measure how we really are connected in profound and measurable ways. Certainly not implying that this is the only way or level of interconnectivity, but certainly one that we can measure, and I think is quite profound, actually. So, we talk a lot about coherence, and we've heard that a lot about coherence through the series so far on Humanity Rising. But I think it's good to step back a little bit and talk about, well, what is coherence? What does it mean anyway? And if you look it up in the dictionary, the first definition is typically around the quality of someone's speech. So hopefully I'll be able to put my words together in a way that is coherent and conveys a meaning past the individual words. So something greater is emerging from the sum of the parts. In physics, it's somewhat similar. And if I'd had too much to drink, maybe last night before my presentation this morning, I'd be uttering nonsense. You'd say I'm incoherent, right? So it's similar in physics. And it's almost always used, the term coherence, in the context of describing how well the parts of a larger complex system communicate with each other and how harmonious they work together. And so in a coherent system, all the parts are working together in a way that is energy efficient and a greater function than some of the parts arises. So it implies that first of all, there has to be communication somehow between the various parts of the complex system, but they're stable and this greater order emerges. So hope that give us a context here. And here at HeartMath, the HeartMath Institute, we really look at coherence in three kind of main areas. One is our personal coherence. So that has to do with our bodies and our mental, emotional, the heart and the brain, how it's communicating with each other, the harmonious order, but really all the parts within the body. And moving into the social domain, we can use coherence. How coherent is a group or a team or a community? Really, even states and cities and nations can all be defined by how coherent they are, which really gets down to the harmonious relationships and how well people are getting along. And then moving to the global side, here we're really looking at humanity itself and its coherence with the earth. And that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. And just as a prelude here, what I'm really going to be suggesting is that humanity is really nested within a giant feedback loop or a giant feedback system with the earth itself. So that the fields of the earth affect us and we affect and add energy, well, really more information into the field of the earth. So that's really more at the global level. So one of the ways we can define personal coherence, over 400 studies now show that when we learn how to increase our personal heart coherence, that has a wide range of benefits. It's an optimal state. So I like to describe it this way. It's an optimal state in which the mind and emotions are brought into alignment and in sync with the energetic heart's intuitive guidance. Jim alluded to this in the beginning here, but it's really when we get the heart and brain working together in a coherent way. Now, this is obviously, many studies have shown this has a lot of personal benefits to us. Lowered blood pressure, better hormonal balance, better performance across a broad range of contexts, whether that's in sports or taking tests or navigating life with less stress and more ease. But one of the biggest benefits of getting more in a heart coherent state is really accessing our own intuition. And that's not the subject of today, but it's an area we've done a lot of research in. And we can say what the research shows us quite literally is that the heart is clearly involved in intuition, especially that the deeper types of intuition, of insights, that inner prompter that comes in terms of our own inner GPS and our own guidance system. But we've been able to do a lot of laboratory studies that really show that the heart is often the first to get the information, intuitive information, and then sends that to the brain. And that when we're in a coherent state, that we have more access to that intuitive flow. So the second bullet on this slide, for some could be surprising and might sound like a new discovery, but it's really been known since the late 1800s that the heart actually sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart through the nervous system. But the heart and brain are communicated in multiple ways. Certainly one of the primary ways is through the neural connections. In fact, the heart and brain are more interconnected with each other in this dynamic relationship than any other systems in the body. So the heart and brain are really very much tied together, if you will, through the nervous system. Now, the third statement here, that I'll call it the quality here of the neural signals that the heart is sending to the brain, has actually profound influence on cognitive or mental functions. And again, this isn't really new either. This has been known for quite some time. In fact, back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, two terms were introduced to describe the effects that the heart had on brain function. One was called cortical inhibition. In other words, our cortex, the part of our brain we get paid to go to work for, is inhibited. We can't think clearly, make poorer decisions. And the other term was called cortical facilitation. In other words, when the heart is sending what we now know to be a coherent pattern of information, that really enhances mental functions. You had many studies around this. But what wasn't known back then, the way we know it today, it was the mechanisms and how this all works. So this has taken a lot of work over many years and many labs to really sort out all the mechanisms. I'm not going to go into all that today, but I've done other presentations, and that information is certainly all available. But what helps explain this is the first statement on the slide you're seeing now, and that is that the heart has its own complex nervous system that's been nicknamed the heart brain. And that nickname didn't come from me. That came from the community of what's called neurocardiology. So we now know that the human heart itself actually has its own functional, what we can call brain. Many neurons in the heart that are sensory neurons, but also that process information. So the neural structures in the heart have long-term memory, short-term memory, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. So they're all, these neurons are not only there, but they're also wired together in a functional way to literally say that it acts as a functional heart brain. And then that brain in the heart is what's communicating with the brain up in our head. So there's this complex system that we have between the heart and brain always talking to each other. Now, one of the windows that gives us insight into the quality of this communication between the heart and brain is called heart rate variability. Now, which just simply means that the time between each consecutive pair of heartbeats is always changing. It's always varying. And that's a good thing. We want high levels of normal heart rate variability. So the slide you're seeing now are basically the beat-to-beat change in heart rate, which is also underlies our heart rhythm. So if the time between each pair of heartbeats was the same, the graphs you're seeing here would be flat lines. So we wouldn't have this variation. Now, the amount of variability we have is important, and that has to do with aging and stress and so on. But at a more fundamental level, the pattern of the heart rhythm gives us much deeper information about what's going on in the brain, the body, and the communication between the heart and brain. So, for example, when we're feeling things, having emotions such as frustration or impatience, anxiety, these types of emotions, this is reflected in the rhythm of the heart in the graph that you see on the left side here called incoherence. And what this is showing us, it's a literal measure of the synchronized activity within and between the heart and brain. So you see these more incoherent or chaotic looking heart rhythm patterns. And that actually has the effect of inhibiting a lot of the cortical functions in our frontal cortex. On the other side of the slide here, where it says coherence, this is what our heart rhythms naturally look like when we have heartfelt feelings like appreciation, love, compassion, kindness, these types of feelings. In other words, you walk out maybe in the morning and it's just one of those days, it's just gorgeous. You just go, oh God, what a beautiful day. And you just have that natural appreciation. You're more likely your heart is beating out this kind of rhythmic pattern you see here, which is what we call heart coherence. This is the signature of that pattern. Now, we've spent here in our research many years developing tools and techniques that are taught now all over the world in many contexts that allow people to make a conscious shift from a more incoherent state to a coherent one. So before making decisions or when we need more intuitive access, we can quickly make the shift into coherence. Now, I could go on and on here, but that's not our main topic. But just wanted to give kind of a basis of what we mean by heart coherence. Now, when the heart beats, it also creates electricity, right? And that's what we measure with the electrocardiogram. So when we put electrodes across the chest, or the same thing if we put them on the head and measure brain waves, what is being measured there is electricity. It's the voltage, the electrical current produced by the heart as measured by the electrocardiogram. But from basic physics, we know that whenever you have a flow of electrical current, you create a magnetic field. Okay, so this is the same kind of magnetic field that I'm talking about now that our cell phones would use to carry information from our phone to the cell tower. And this can be measured with a different device. The electrocardiogram doesn't measure the magnetic component, it's measuring current flow. But with a device called magnetometers, we can measure the magnetic component, the magnetic field. Now with today's magnetometers, you can detect the field produced by the heart, the magnetic field. I'm not really talking about an aura here. I can't measure those yet here in the lab. But with magnetometers, we can measure the heart's magnetic field up to about 3 feet from the body. Now, that doesn't mean the field only goes 3 feet. We know from other experiments it goes much farther. That's just the sensitivity of the current magnetometers to measure the field. Now, to put that in respect to brain waves, which you can also measure external to the head, with the same device that you can measure the heart 3 feet, you can measure a brainwave about 1 inch. So clearly, energetically speaking, in our magnetic world, our personal field environment, the heart is the big player here. It's the big field. Now, interestingly, we can measure these fields and detect the fields and then do what's another level of analysis, which I'll show you in a moment here, and see that the vibrational pattern of those fields changes actually instantaneously in real time with our attitudes, emotions, and intentions, but especially our emotions. Now, the field probably contains a lot of things we don't understand yet, but for sure, it's carrying information about our emotional state. So you can think of this as our personal field environment. So here's a process called spectral analysis of the magnetic field data. And we can see that the informational patterns being carried by the magnetic field of the heart are quite different when we're feeling, experiencing something like appreciation, or care or compassion versus anger. Now, it's not that one pattern is necessarily good or bad. As it turns out, actually, appreciation is a more coherent structure. But the main point here is they're different, right? So whatever our emotions are, whatever we're feeling inside, they don't just stay inside of us. They are literally being radiated into our field environment. And we can actually detect those fields and use these analysis approaches. And today, it would tell with about 70-75% accuracy somebody's emotional state just from looking at the patterns in the field. Okay, so basically, what happens in us is also radiated into our local field environment, and as we'll see, also into the global field environment. Now, interestingly, a number of experiments have now been done that show that when we're, depending upon what state we're in and the types of fields we're radiating, that has measurable effects on others. So what you're seeing here was a study that was done quite a few years ago now, where groups of 4 people, 40 people were divided into these groups of 4, and we're basically sitting around a table and all wired up to measure their physiology. And at random times, 3 of these 4 people were signaled to shift into a heart coherent state. Now, the 4th person didn't know what the true purpose of the experiment was. They were kind of naive to it. And you can kind of see the answer to the main research question here. When the others of the group became more coherent, and they, by the way, these were not experts, right? They had only been taught the skill of how to shift into coherence about 2 weeks before the experiment. But the main point here is that this had a lifting effect on the 4th person. When the others got coherent, the 4th person typically would be lifted into a more coherent state, even though they didn't have a clue what was happening. So this has been confirmed since many times over in larger groups. And the other interesting thing that happened in this series of experiments is the heart-to-heart synchronization amongst the different members of these groups. They also got more literally in sync with each other. So that would be taking us more into the social coherence. Kind of more moving to the global level, the Global Coherence Initiative, which was started about 12 years ago as a science-based project. And this is really a very co-creative project. We have a lot of collaborators around the world that are working on with the GCI project. And there's 2 levels of this. One is bringing people together to really add heart energy to the field. And Teresa will be talking later about that in what's called the Global Coherence Pulse. But then there's the science side, which is more what I'm talking about today. But the purpose of the Global Coherence Initiative is really to unite people in heart focus, love, and intention. And this is really with the purpose of helping lift global consciousness and really shifting us into a more cooperative, caring, and peaceful kind of world. These are some of the bases that we base our work on. Kind of tried to simplify these from the scientific hypothesis I used to talk about. But number 1 here, the Earth is constantly bathed in electromagnetic fields. This is not a hypothesis. This is scientific fact. So we live in various magnetic fields, which I'll describe a couple of here shortly. But then even the Earth and its magnetic field are nested within the sun's magnetic field, which is within a greater magnetic field. So we really live in fields within fields within fields. And what I'm suggesting here is these, especially the Earth's magnetic field, connects all living systems on the planet, including us. And that we're always feeding information into the field, and the information in the fields profoundly affects us. That we know for a fact. So we're basically coupled to the field. And this is what I mean by a giant biofeedback system. So if this is true, when large enough numbers of people come together and we intentionally shift into coherence, or we're just living in a more coherent state, that increased love, care, and compassion generates a more coherent field environment that then affects all living systems within the greater field, which is really everything on Earth. All the animals, the plants, all the people, we all live within this larger magnetic field. So we can really help offset a lot of the stress waves that are currently in the field by adding more love and compassion into the field. And I would like to say here that what we feed the field matters. In other words, by changing the information in the field can, and we have more and more evidence, change not only the physical world and different devices, but especially the consciousness of people, of other people. Now there's many, many studies, hundreds actually, that confirm what I'm showing on the slide here, that the activity in the background fields of the Earth affect the activity in a measurable way, our brain and nervous system, how well we perform on various tasks, our blood pressure, our hormones, heart rates are all kind of synchronized in a way with and affected by these background magnetic fields. But even things like the number of traffic tickets that the law enforcement officers write and the number of accidents kind of right along with and are modulated by how coherent or how disturbed the field is. Hospital admissions, not just for heart attacks and strokes, which clearly are associated with this, but a wide range of health challenges are also kind of affected by and modulated, if you will, by these background magnetic fields of the Earth. And interestingly, of many of the different physiological systems that have been studied, one of the most profoundly affected and reflected these changes is actually the activity of the heart. But the heart and brain are the two main systems. A little background here, Alexander Chesovsky is often or is considered the father of the field of what's called helobiology, helo meaning sun in this case. And he was a Russian astrophysicist who was drafted into World War I. And being an astrophysicist, he was keeping one eye on the sun and solar activity during the war, World War I. And it occurred to him that during high solar activity, more solar flares and these types of things, that people down here on Earth were affected by that. And the battles were kind of bloodier and people were just doing more kind of crazy things during these high solar activity days or periods. And that got him intrigued. So after the war, he did an exhaustive study of human history. And I've read a number of his original works now, the translations, and it's amazing the detail and the rigor that went into this research. So this next graph I'm going to show you is his original data that was first published in 1926. But what you're seeing here, if we go to the left, the top left on the blue line here, we're starting in 1749, right, the blue line, and then it wraps around on the bottom up to 1926 or so. Now, what's being plotted here in the blue line is the number of major human events that occurred each year. So every year we have the number of major human events. So these would be things like the start of war, revolutions, major discoveries, but things that had kind of global, large-scale effects. So the red line on the bottom is the solar cycle activity for the same time period. I mean, this was jaw-dropping to me when I first learned of this, when I first saw this many years ago now. But the correlation, I mean, you can see it in the data. And of course, mathematically and statistically, it's very highly correlated. And this has been confirmed by many different researchers now and brought it right into modern times as well. So we can see that there is a clear relationship between solar activity and the number of major human events. Now, a little bit later, this went back to 1749, because at that time, this was how far back solar data had been traced and tracked. But then later, other research groups, through ice core drilling thing, we had solar cycle activity much farther back, did some work showing that the onsets of wars for pretty much all of recorded history, about 80% of them started at the very peaks, around the peaks, either right before or right after the change in the peak of the solar cycles. So this might sound like, oh my God, you know, the fields are out to get us, but no. And this is really important to understand. These same time periods of high solar activity and high solar cycles is also the periods of greatest human flourishing. Now, this is true across the planet in different societies and cultures that don't even know each other, that these same periods are when we flourish. It's the most development of arts and music, scientific discoveries, new collaborations, and all these types of things going on. So what we know now that Chesovsky didn't know, that with the solar cycle, during the peaks of the solar cycle, the sun is emitting more, literally, now we know we can measure this, more energy. And at Chesovsky's time, this was before the discovery of things like X-rays and ultraviolet and solar radio flux and all the things we currently know about. That kind of a long story short, these are appearing to be energy sources that literally affect the human energy, that we absorb and can use these different energetic sources as energy. Now that's its own story, and many studies are supporting that perspective. So to do research, to really look at the interconnectivity between humanity and the earth, we have to measure things. So this is, you could think of this, I'll say metaphorically, like listening to the heart rhythms and brain waves of the earth. It may not end up being a metaphor, but for now we'll call it that. So to do that, we've created what's called the Global Coherence Monitoring System. Now, this is a network of ultra-sensitive magnetometers that are specifically designed to measure the resonant frequencies, the fluctuations in the various magnetic fields of Earth. So currently we have these sites around the world. We have one here in California, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Lithuania, South Africa, New Zealand, and we probably would have had one by now in Colombia, which is our next site had the pandemic not occurred. I wish we didn't have to do this ourselves. These are very expensive to do, and a lot of energy goes into this. But this is the only time-synchronized global system constantly monitoring the magnetic fields of the Earth in a global way. There are many other magnetometers out there, but there are different types that are really used to measure disturbance in the field, which is also important, especially for protection of power lines and communication systems. But they don't really measure the resonant frequencies. They're not designed to do that. So that's why we had to create this system ourselves. Here's a picture of the site here in Boulder Creek in Northern California, up on the top of one of our hills here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so what am I talking about when I'm talking about measuring the resonant frequencies? So most of us know that we have a geomagnetic field, right? This is the thing our compasses tune into. And we all take a moment and appreciate that we have a magnetic field, that the Earth has this field, because without it, Earth would look like Mars very quickly. So it's the Earth's geomagnetic field that protects Earth from the various solar radiations and the solar wind, which would quickly blow away the atmosphere of the Earth and the water, but quite quickly if that didn't exist. So this is the field that has the North and South Pole, what our compasses, tune into, so to speak. Now, I'd like to invite you to kind of time travel back in your mind to when you were back in science class and back in grade school or junior high, probably about when I think we did it, when you got to dump iron filings on a glass plate, right? And you put your magnet under the glass plate and you see that all the iron filings kind of dance around and line up in ways to show you the shape of whatever the field is around the type of magnet that you have. But recall that those iron filings are in lines. It wasn't a homogeneous kind of black blob. So what this is showing us is a visual representation of magnetic field lines. So these are real things, these magnetic field lines. And Earth's magnetic field is no different. And these white lines are kind of representing what an idealized picture of the field lines. Now here's where it gets interesting. These magnetic field lines are very similar and act just like guitar strings or any stringed instrument. And you can pluck them. And when you pluck the string of a guitar or violin, whatever, they vibrate, right? And they have resonant frequencies, or what we would call the note or the pitch if it was a musical instrument. So Earth is exactly the same way. Now what's plucking the lines or the strings of the Earth's field is the solar wind. So the solar wind are these high energy particles and plasmas, as it's called, that are being kind of blown out of the sun. And the solar wind travels on a quiet day at about 1,000,000 miles per hour, right? And that's the solar wind has enough pressure on the Earth that it actually pushes in the magnetic field on the daytime side of the Earth and stretches it out on the nighttime side as it's rushing by. Meanwhile, Earth is turning, and so is the sun. So as the solar wind is rushing by the Earth, it's plucking the field lines, plucking the strings, and they're vibrating. Now, some new data, which I think is really cool here. This is relatively new, only a couple of years now. And this is data from NASA and a system of 5 satellites that they put up specifically to study the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the little white dot you see in the center here, that's the Earth. But what you're seeing here is the actual real data. This is not an artistic thing. This is the actual data from these satellites where you can actually visualize and see the ringing, the vibration of the Earth's fields and the complexity of what it really looks like. So when we measure these fields, the frequency of these vibrating field lines down here on Earth, this is what you see. This is from the Global Coherence Monitoring System. That there is this set of, and they're actually technically called field line resonances, by the way, which makes sense. They're field lines vibrating, resonating. Well, the strings, if you will, or the field lines of Earth are very long because the magnetic field goes out many, many thousands of miles into space, around from the north to the South Pole. So they're really long. And just like in a guitar, the longer the string, the lower the frequency or the note will be. So one of the primary resonant frequencies of Earth is at this first peak you see here at 0.1 hertz. But there's a whole range of these field line resonances. And pretty much all of this range overlaps with human physiology, with our heart rhythms and the rhythms in our nervous system. Now, 0.1 hertz, a lot of you probably have heard about this before, turns up a lot, and especially in the case of when we're in a heart coherent state. So when we have a coherent heart rhythm, the frequency for the majority is a bell curve, but the center of that bell curve for humanity is 0.1 hertz. So what I'm saying here is that when we're in a heart coherent state, and our own individual personal resonant frequency is 0.1 hertz, which is exactly the same frequency as the resonances of Earth, of the field line resonances. Now, a second set of magnetic waves that are important to mention here are a very different mechanism than the field line resonances, which are the really big waves. But the second set of magnetic waves that are relevant to our health, our physiology, and I would suggest our consciousness, are Schumann resonances. Now, there's a lot of confusion out there that I see, especially in the last few years, about Schumann resonances. What these are magnetic waves that are traveling around the Earth. They're not generated from within the Earth, but they're waves that are trapped between the bottom of what's called the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth. And so the ionosphere, you can think of as a giant soap bubble around the planet, if you're not familiar with it. This layer of highly ionized, called plasma, or gas. And plasma is the fourth state of matter, and it has a lot of special properties. One of those is that it's like a mirror to lower frequency magnetic waves. They bounce off of it. In fact, if you're familiar with amateur or ham radio operators, this is exactly how that works, is that you send your radio wave up and it hits the ionosphere and bounces off. So this is how somebody in the United States is talking to maybe others that have their radios in China or Europe. And if you're really lucky, you get a second bounce, and now you're talking to people in New Zealand and South Africa and places like that. But so it's the fact that the ionosphere bounces these radio waves off. So when magnetic waves get stimulated and created, that create these magnetic waves that fit the geometry, and this is the key part here, of this cavity, the right frequency to fit harmoniously in there, they become what are technically called globally propagating standing waves. Now that just means they're everywhere all the time, okay? And they're called Schumann resonance after a German mathematician who first modeled that these waves need to exist. And they were first measured in around 1960. Now, as it turns out, there's 8 Schumann resonances. We hear a lot about the first one, which is around 7.8 hertz, but there are 8 of them, and they all overlap the same frequencies as human brain rhythms. Okay, so 7.8, that's kind of the point between what we would call low alpha and theta. So it's right in that kind of important brainwave frequency. So basically, what I'm saying here is both the heart and brain are oscillating and vibrating at the same resonant frequencies of Earth. The field line resonances are the really big ones. Now, I don't know what this means anything, but it's really similar that Earth has the same kind of ratio of field strength as we do in our bodies. Remember how I said the heart is the big field? You can measure many feet outside the body, where brain waves you can only measure an inch. Well, it's similar at Earth scales. The field line resonances are the really big waves, magnetically speaking, and the Schumann resonance is very tiny in comparison. In fact, the Schumann resonances are kind of riding on top of the field line resonances when we actually plot that out. But the point is, when we resonate at the same frequency, like with tuning forks, I'm sure most of you have seen examples where you tap one tuning fork and another tuning fork to tune to the same frequency starts to vibrate with it, showing us what's called resonant coupling. So, which means you can transfer energy and information between systems that oscillate at the same frequency, which is what I'm showing us here, is that our hearts and brains oscillate at the same frequency as of Earth. So at least we have the very basic physics to understand how we could be transferring energy and information between the Earth's field and our hearts and brains. Now, some experiments that we published quite a bit in the last few years on this, but I wanted to share the first study that was kind of paradigm shifting for us. And this was a study that was done in participants across the state of California. So we had people in the southern part of the state, some here in central, some north of us. And these people were wearing recorders that record your heart rate variability for 24 hours a day. So they wore these every day for a whole month, for 30 days. This group of people did. And our original research question was, do we see quantifiable changes in people's nervous system activity, which is what heart rate variability reflects, is the activity in our autonomic nervous system and the dynamics, with changes in the background solar and magnetic fields? That was our original question. Yes, they do, and that's all published. But the surprise became when we time synchronized the HRV data, the beat-to-beat change in heart rate, right, across these people, across the state, expecting to see a noisy flat line. I mean, after all, why should my beat-to-beat change in my heart rates have anything to do with somebody in Southern California or Northern California, for example? So this is what you're seeing here. The black and gray lines are the different aspects of the heart rate variability when we time synchronize the group's beat-to-beat change in heart rate. We did not see, obviously, here a noisy flat line. What this is showing us is that the heart rhythms of this group of people are synchronized. And this was kind of mind-blowing, first of all, and we spent quite a bit of time trying to make this go away. We've made a mistake, but no, it was very confirmed it in many different ways. So the only thing that could really explain this, at least from our thinking, was that these people are exposed to and synchronizing to some other signal that was across the entire state. Magnetic field seems to be the obvious. So that's the red line. So the red line is the power, or it's the proper word, power in the resonant frequencies, which are changing. How stable you could think of it are the resonant frequencies of Earth. And you can actually see again here the correlations. And then on the right side is it's called a power spectrum, looking at the frequency of the changes in the human data and the Earth data. And we see it's exact overlap. So basically what this is showing us is that even spread across hundreds of miles, in this case, people are synchronizing to the Earth's field. Now, this was a relatively small study. So we figured, we better expand this and look a lot deeper into it. So we were fortunate to be able to get some funding to do a large international HRV synchronization study. So now we had groups of 20 people in each group in 5 countries. So a lot of data doing the same thing. So we had groups in New Zealand, Lithuania, here in California, Saudi Arabia, and also a group in the UK. And long story short, what we are seeing here is that people are in fact synchronizing globally. We don't have time to go into the complexities, but with this many people, we were able to pull out different types of subgroups of synchronization. But basically on the left side here, The black line is the power in the Earth's magnetic frequencies, the resonant frequencies in the Schumann resonance band. And the blue line is people pulled out of the subgroups from these groups all around the world. And what this is showing us is that their hearts are synchronized with each other and with the Earth's, the power and the resonant frequencies of the Earth. Again, an amazing, almost unbelievable degree of synchronization. We would never have predicted this. And that, we spent a lot of time trying to make these effects go away, just to make sure we've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's here. The graph on the left, on the right side of this is showing you the black line here is the power in the resonant frequencies in the field line resonances in the lower frequencies. And then you see another type of synchronization happening here at the lower field line resonant frequencies, again, from the people around the world. So this is just showing that we are profoundly interconnected with the Earth's fields. And it's more and more data and more studies coming out showing that this is a good thing, that it's good to be in sync with the Earth, and probably not so good for a lot of reasons to be out of sync. And one of the indications, there's a lot more research needed here, but is emerging, is that if we're feeling a lot of stress and kind of out of sync with ourselves, that we're also tend to be out of sync with the Earth. Now, within this second study, these groups around the world, 20 in each group, we also did what's called a heart lock-in, kind of in the middle of the study, where all these groups around the world did basically a technique called a heart lock-in together at the same time for 15 minutes. Excuse me. Now, when we do a heart lock-in, we know that this generates a measurable state of increased personal coherence, which we may, of course, measured in this study. But here I'm just showing you the data from one of the groups, so the group in Lithuania. At the individual level, so on the left, you're seeing the degree of individual participant synchronization with the Earth's field. In this case, the day before the group did this heart lock-in technique together globally. And on the right, you're seeing the data that the day of that heart lock-in. So this again was a surprise, that this degree of change, that all of the people not only are now positively correlated, but we see a significant change in the synchronization with the Earth for a full 24-hour period. So what I'm saying here is just getting coherent together in a group, in this case, for 15 minutes resulted in increased synchronization with the Earth for the next 24 hours. Now, I can go on and show you the graphs just like this for each of the groups. They all look the same way. So this was happening with all the groups around the world. So basically what this study showed is that when we get coherent in our personal coherence, it increased the measurable synchronization with the others in the group and with the Earth itself. Okay. Now, one of my favorite studies from the Global Consciousness Project, a lot of you are probably familiar with that. Roger Nelson, the founder of that project at Princeton at that time, has spent over the last 20 years studying the output of a global network of random devices that so many years later now it's quite clear that when events happen on Earth that evoke a large number of people paying attention to something, but especially feeling something, and Dr. Nelson's very clear that it's emotion that drives these effects, that we see that these physical devices of random number generators positioned globally around the planet stop being as random in a small but measurable way. In other words, a coherence is induced, an order is induced into what's otherwise chaotic noise, you can think of it, but a random noise. And what he has shown in my favorite study of his is that when there are events that evoke high levels of love and compassion, so this would be like global peace days, global prayer days, these types of things where we're really adding love and compassion to the field, or events that evoke these feelings, that this has a significantly greater effect on these physical devices around the world than events that evoke either medium levels, a high lot of emotion. So this would be like a Super Bowl or a World Cup day, a lot of emotion, but not necessarily love and compassion. And then low events, this would be like after terror attacks and these types of things that are more, hate driven and incoherence driven. But the fact that the events in love and compassion have a significantly greater effect in modulating this network of devices, these physical devices around the world. I think this is just awesome. And it kind of ties back into what I'm really suggesting here, if I can kind of summarize this, is that when we're more loving, more compassionate, that naturally increases the coherence in our hearts and in our personal fields, which helps lift others, but also increases the coupling to the greater field Earth environment. So I mean, this is, I think, a neat way of actually supporting that perspective. So basically, what I would invite you all to do is to consider, what am I feeding the field? To really take time each day, a few times a day, as often as you can remember to do it, and ask yourself, what am I feeding the field? How much of it is feeding the field with maybe impatience or anxiety, frustration, these types of things? We're in a pandemic, people wanting to get out and do their thing, versus how much are we feeding the field with true frequencies of compassion, appreciation, right, cooperation. So I believe it's really time for us to collectively start feeding the field with more love and care for each other. Because what we feed the field matters. Okay? And we are at a point in the history of consciousness and the evolution of consciousness where we have an opportunity to really usher in the next great leap, the next shift in consciousness to a more compassionate and cooperative way of being, which is, to me, what the shift is all about that we're talking about. And so what we do inside matters in terms of the larger field environment. And we're all contributing equally to the field, although coherence does organize noise. So when we can be coherent, we're helping put a stronger coherent signal into the field environment, which helps others, lifts them so they can wake up. Now, one of the ways that we're helping people become more coherent at a global scale is we've developed what's called the Global Coherence app. So this is an app that measures your HRV coherence and feeds that back, not only at a personal level, which is kind of shown on the screen here by the center screen, but also at the group level. So we can measure people's coherence at a large scale from people anywhere in the world. And one of my favorite things about the app is the map that shows when people who are there with you right now practicing adding coherent heart energy to the field environment. So this is the global map. It's really fun to go see where people are around the earth with you. But we're also quantifying and measuring the coherence that's being added. And if you don't need a sensor to use it. There's guides in it. You show up on the map. But those that want to take it to the next level and participate in the future studies that we'll be doing, where we actually measure the number of people and how coherent they are, and how that's affecting the various measures in the global field environment. That's awesome. Some of you might choose to want to get a sensor so you can get that personal feedback and also the feedback at the group level. So this is the Global Coherence app, and it uses a sensor called the Inner Balance Pulse Sensor. There's several versions of it. There's a Bluetooth that works with Android or iPhones, and then there's also a wired sensor for the iOS or Apple devices. So that is the kind of the essence of what I'd wanted to share with you today. And I guess, Jim, we're going to do some Q&A now. Is that correct?
Yes. So, well, Rollin, I would call that a tour de force, my friend. And I wanted people to hear Rollin's immense perspective before announcing that Ubiquity has just awarded Rollin an honorary PhD for his extraordinary work and research in the fields that he's just laid out over the last 45 minutes. You know, from time to time, we want to honor some of the heretics and mavericks and audacious thinkers of our time, and they pop up in all kinds of nooks and crannies. And so, Rollin, I just want to thank you, and as I'm sure everybody listening to your presentation will agree, it's well worth a doctoral accolade for the work that you are doing. It's quite extraordinary. So,
thank you for that, Jim. I do feel very honored by this award, and I appreciate it very deeply. Thank you.
Yeah, Well, thank you. There's so many questions, and I'm also conscious of the time, but let's take the next 15, 20 minutes. A couple, I have 4 questions that I hope we can work through. The first one came from Bruce Schumann, and he was asking Rollin about the coherence of a broken heart. You know, when one thinks of heart incoherence and coherence, one normally thinks of positive emotions as opposed to discordant emotions. But what if someone in the aftermath of a death of a loved one is in deep grief, or in the breakup after a love relationship, and that there's a grief that you feel like your heart is broken? Is there coherence in a broken heart, or is a broken heart an indication of incoherence?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great question. And I could attack this one, or not attack, but kind of respond to this from a lot of different angles. But I really believe that there's no such thing as a broken heart. In other words, the heart, if we're really talking about the heart that I'm talking about, that connection to our larger self, that connects our consciousness to who we really are at a deeper level, that heart is what can actually guide us through a grieving process. And of course, if the death of a loved one or something, we're going to naturally go through grieving and feel sad, these types of things. But I would suggest that that's really our mind, and missing that person, all these different things that go on, the grieving, that through the different connections from the brain to the heart, that is certainly feel it in the heart. But it's also a lot of times some of the toughest periods in life that actually end up taking us to the heart and the deeper heart, that eventually is able to bring in the healing and lift us back into wholeness after an event. And in fact, I think it takes, unfortunately, it doesn't have to be this way, but for so many people, it does take big stressors, big events, to finally kind of humble the mind enough to where it will actually surrender and listen to the heart. Hope I'm making sense here.
Yeah.
So it's, yes, it's a broken heart, and we feel it in the heart, but it's at the same time, it's that deeper part of the heart that helps us through those challenging times and kind of lifts us back into our more balanced perspective, and be able to kind of move on with life, make peace with, and move on.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, thank you. The next question comes from Kate Habor. And, as we all know, we have chakras. We have energy centers in the body, not only in the heart, but in the solar plexus, our throat, third eye, etc. And her question was, how basically does the intelligence of another energy center, say the gut, we know with our gut, as well as with our heart. So how does, for example, the knowing with our gut, our tummy, affect, and how is it informed by the knowing through our heart?
Okay, so what the researcher just said, yes, we can call it the chakras, or I think of its energy centers. And I was talking about more and more data showing how we actually literally can absorb and incorporate energy from other sources, these other solar geomagnetic rhythms or energy sources. That is most likely mediated by what we can call the chakra system, the energy centers. But even if we look at the chakras, what's the center of the chakra? The center chakra of the chakra system is the heart, right? So the center of the wheel, if you want to think of it that way. So the 3 main energy centers, I think most would agree with this, are the heart, the one here in the brain, and the gut. And the one in the solar plexus is the one that we naturally kind of go to if we're grounding. If we're going to say walk on a railroad beam and try and be balanced, right? Or we're going to stick our toe in some water, we don't know if it's cold or not. It's kind of where we naturally put our energy. Now, and so they're all important. I mean, it's the whole thing here is in a coherent system, how well are all the energies centers and also the physiological systems in the body cooperating and coordinating in a wholeness that allows higher functions to emerge. So I'm always about the system, right, and the coherence between them. But so if we take the 3 main nodal points, heart, brain, gut, They're all obviously important. And I want a brain. I want it to work well and function well, right? And as it turns out, being heart coherent, the brain's one of the big winners, right? Because it becomes more aligned and informed. Now, interestingly, you brought in for intuition is my term here. And this is an area we've done a lot of actual research in and laboratory-based research. As it turns out, when we actually trace the flow of what we call non-local intuition through the scientific paradigm, the heart is actually the first to get the information, the non-local intuitive information. Sends a different neural signal to the brain, all before the future event. And this is all published for people that want to go read details. Then you get a body response, the gut, or the hair on the back of the neck. So the gut gets a lot of the credit, the gut feeling. But when you actually look at the flow of information, it's actually heart, brain, body. So the gut feeling or the different physiological sensations are where it becomes conscious as a conscious intuitive feeling. So it's really heart first, then brain, then gut or body, then conscious awareness is what the data suggests.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. That leads to the next question by Maher Ezzedine, who's wondering whether, with the solar flares and the magnetic fields of the Earth, and obviously you're opening up a major area of the influence of other planets on human behavior. If you've any of you out there have read Rick Tarnas's book Cosmos and Psyche, like Tchaikovsky, he has chronicled the last 2,500 years of human history according to the alignments of the major planets. Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, etc., Mars, and found striking correlation. So the question that Maher is asking, I think, is very, very profound. When these frequencies come in, like a solar flare or the vibrations electromagnetic from June, are they carrying information? Is it's simply a magnetic or physical frequency that, what's the connection, Rollin, between a solar flare at intensity and the fact there's an outbreak of wars or human creativity? What's the sequence of effect that causes a human being to actually respond? Are there signals coming in from the outside? Is it a chemical reaction inside? What do you know, or what does the data suggest?
Wow, what a deep question. That would probably take a whole segment to really delve into to answer that in any kind of meaningful way.
Yeah, well,
we're certainly not going to do in 15 minutes, but yes, I would say all of that. But there's levels and layers, right? As I kind of mentioned at the beginning, the Earth and its whole magnetic system is literally nested within the sun's magnetic field, right? Of the whole solar system. So it's a giant system again, with many levels of interconnection and strengths. And the moon going around the planet also has effects. I'm going to answer it this way: that yes, all of these things have influences and subtle influences. Some probably through gravitational influences, some more electromagnetic. Some clearly both. But a lot of electromagnetic. Now, interestingly, we're starting to see that. Let me back up a little bit. Historically, many studies have been done, and the only thing people had to look at in the research community was a measure of magnetic field disturbance called the AP and KP indexes. They didn't have what we have now with our monitoring system to actually look at the resonant frequencies. So many studies have historically looked at high magnetic field disturbance, like when the Earth gets hit with a solar flare and disturbs the field, it becomes very incoherent. And the other data point that people have had access to was hospital admissions. So many studies have looked at this. When the magnetic field of the Earth gets disturbed when we get hit by a solar flare, for example, disturbs the field, and hospital admissions clearly go up, around the world in different latitudes, a little bit different effects, and for a wide range of diseases or health challenges. Interestingly, it's the mental and emotional things like depression, suicides that are even more affected than some of the physical things like strokes and heart attacks. So it's now that's given the impression that this field stuff is not good for us. because that's all we've looked at is disturbances. And if you look at hospital data, well, who is it that are being admitted on these disturbed days? It's usually elderly people, quite old, already with a chronic health condition. So in a way, it's kind of, I think, created a misperception. So a number of our studies, we've been looking at healthy populations over long time periods during normal days, which, I mean, in reality, the Earth's field is not disturbed that often. I mean, it's only a few times a year we really get whacked with a high field disturbance. And what we're seeing is a very different picture, is that these radiations from the sun, what's called solar radio flux, the different frequencies of the Earth when they're high, these are good things for us. We actually do better than when they're low. This is kind of a hard answer here, but to really give them, is that starting to make sense? So it's a different picture emerging. And what I'm really seeing here is that we're always connected to the field, the Earth's field. Not only that way of interconnection, but this is one we can actually measure, and do research around. But it would just make sense to me that our magnetic fields of our hearts, because they're the same resonance in brains, are coupled to the Earth's, the fields of the Earth. So it's kind of a giant information field. So yes, it's information. Now, one of the other factors we've seen in studies that also seems to have a positive effect on humanity is cosmic rays. So these are energies coming outside of our solar system. And when they're increased, we also see people's HRV increase, and people report a lot of positive things. So in my own, I can't prove this yet, but certainly my belief and intuition would be that absolutely these things all carry information. I mean, if we just take my cell phone here, right, kind of what I was alluding to, we create a magnetic field, right, but which is neutral between the cell phone and my tower. But it's what it's doing is carrying information. It's the information is the key here. So I can, it's what's carrying my text message or my voice or my photo is the field's carrying the information. So in the case of what I'm really describing here in the global coherence perspective is that we are always feeding into the field information. And that's information about that can be, just like on my cell phone, I could be yelling at somebody, calling them names and really angry. Well, that's an information I'm not only transmitting through the phone, but energetically into the field environment. Or I could be telling them how much I love them and miss them, and right, which is a very different set of information. Anyway, I rambled on a bit there. I hope that was somewhat of an answer to the question.
No, but that's important. I mean, because I think this question, if we could figure out how that translation occurs, we would be enormously empowered in terms of human choice in relationship to a sun flare.
Yeah.
And so thank you for raising this. And this brings us actually, since you just used your cell phone as an example, David Beatty was asking the question, how all of our digital use, I mean, if you think there's several billion cell phones all emanating electromagnetic pulses and frequencies all over the world, all the time, to say nothing about our computers. So is there any data that is showing how increased human use of digital technology is affecting natural electromagnetic pulsations and systems?
Yeah. I mean, this is a topic. It's a kind of a tough one to really answer. You asked it, that shows that it affects natural systems. I would say that there's no research I know of that shows that it's affecting, like the natural background Earth type frequencies and things. Yeah. And it kind of makes sense that there wouldn't be, because they're in radically different frequency ranges. I mean, the stuff we're talking about with Earth are very low frequency and in the same rhythms and frequencies as physiology, where cell phones and these things are many orders of magnitudes and different frequencies. Now, it's not to imply that they don't have biological effects, but just the sheer magnitude of the Earth scale magnetic rhythms it would be kind of hard to imagine my little cell phone having much to do with it, especially in such a different frequency band. So I don't know if that's answers your question, Jim, but hopefully it helps.
Yeah.
And just one other comment, you know, a very famous person in the field of magnetic influences on human systems, a guy named Ross 80, who's now, I had the honor of getting to know him and meeting him a number of times way back earlier in my career. And he did a lot of work on the biological effects of external magnetic fields. And what he found was really interesting. He found that what he calls their biological windows, that there can be profound effects on biology from external fields, but they only have effects in very narrow what he called windows. They have to be the right amplitude, strength of signal, and the right frequency and pattern. And if you get that right, they can have profound effects. And as it turns out, the ones that have the stronger effects are in the same windows as the biological rhythms that we produce and generate, and that's being produced by the Earth. Those are where the windows are. So our cell phones and things are really quite outside of those windows. Now, I'm not trying to say they don't have some effects and we don't know, but certainly from the basic, right. And in fact, the cell phone people have known for a long time that the carrier is not so important, but the modulation frequency does. In other words, if you modulate a magnetic signal at the similar modulation of a brainwave, you can induce things like seizures and things. I mean, we know that for flickers and TVs, but even magnetically, that's also true. So that's been known by the cell phone industry for a long, long time, and they avoid modulations that are similar as biological windows. Anyway, so it's, again, I'm kind of going off on probably a tangent here that.
Yeah, I'm glad that they know this information, or there'd be a lot of people having spontaneous heart attacks. Yes. and seizures. So, well, Rollin, thank you so much. This has been an education to us all. And, you know, what comes to mind is that great line from Plotinus, the Neoplatonist philosopher in the 3rd century, that said that the whole universe breathes together. You know, and it's actually quite comforting that the emanations from the sun and the moon and the planets and the earth affect us. We're one with them. And the challenge of aligning ourselves with the natural systems, and as you're saying, actually understanding that how we live our lives, what we think, what we say, what we do, feeds information into the field.
Yeah, especially what we feel.
Yeah, especially what we feel. Yeah. Is really a profound awareness for us all to kind of take in and ponder very, very deeply. So thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you.
My honor. Thanks for the invitation and also the award. I'm very humbled by it. Thank you.
Well deserved. Now I'd like to turn to Claudia Wells. I introduced her earlier as the chairperson of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. She's had a long and distinguished career in social activism. She's a former student of our wisdom school and a good friend and colleague who's been working in this whole domain that Rollin has been describing of global coherence. So Claudia, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Rollin and Jim. It's great to see you both, and it's always such a pleasure to follow you, Rollin. You make introducing the Global Coherence Pulse so easy, because once people understand the power of heart coherence, it's a no-brainer to understand the potential of the Global Coherence Pulse. Before we start, we'd like to dedicate today's pulse to a very young humanity in profound transition, and especially to the most marginalized among us, the most affected by a paradigm based on a belief in separation. And that is manifesting as crises everywhere we look. The extent of humanity's collective incoherence is now so obviously on display Our challenges are personal, structural, and systemic, sometimes referred to as super wicked problems. And to me, that means there's no central external authority that can address them. And we have a brief opportunity before some new external authority rises up to try and capture the moment, to cultivate our own inner authority, the authority of our own hearts, and discover humanity's collective heart. So the Global Coherence Pulse is a network of networks, including HeartMath and Global Coherence Initiative, which I've been part of since before the beginning, to help activate humanity's collective heart by intentionally pulsing the planet with coherence. The pulse represents both a new social collaboration of many and growing like-hearted organizations, and a new scientific collaboration, representing a growing global network of sensors and social metrics, as Rollin was saying, being monitored to correspond with our coherent meditations, and coming together in support of a critical mass of coherence and a tipping point in global consciousness, where the love of power is eclipsed by the power of love, of gratitude, of joyful appreciation, and then not just make that shift, but turn up that power by turning coherence building into a social function, making it intentional, creative, effective, and even fun, and helping science tell the new story of our profound interconnectedness. Many such efforts have been made over the years, and there's still much to learn. But if we can measure a real-world impact of thousands of people intentionally pulsing coherence at the same time, we could witness a breakthrough in understanding the full potential of the human heart for collective healing at a time when there's so much collective trauma. In this Humanity Rising series, Jim, you've been consistently calling for mechanisms of strategic effectiveness at every level. And I just heard Rollin describe the strategic effectiveness of heart coherence at personal, social, and even planetary scales. So we created the Pulse because we recognized coherence as a huge untapped resource for responding to this massive global change moment. Teresa and I have spent many years in the field of conscious evolution, so we know that crisis is an evolutionary driver and that evolution is a contingency, not a guarantee. We created the Pulse because we know it's not enough to consider what we want from life. We also need to consider what life wants from us. And we began the Pulse at the beginning of the pandemic because we know the time is now, including because of what's happening in solar weather and beyond. We know it's time to walk our talk, to send the planet love, not just thoughts of love or hopes of love that may actually be riding on the frequencies of fear, but the kind of love that moves the world even while much of the world's not moving, even while many of us are still in self-isolation. That's the difference between a love that has the power of a 40-watt bulb, which is incoherent light, and a love with the power of laser light, which is spatially coherent light, precise enough for microsurgery and powerful enough to burn a hole through steel. Doing this means taking coherence from intellectual construct, something we talk about, to embodiment, something we become. And as we just heard, HeartMath provides a lot of scientific empowerment for doing this. Another source of empowerment comes from the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Ilya Prigogine, who demonstrated that in complex systems that are far from equilibrium, as our world is now, small islands of coherence can shift the entire system to a higher order. I think this is also what the modern mystic Thomas Hübl means when he says crisis and miracles are very close together. It's also true that the further a system is from equilibrium or stability, the less energy it takes to create a shift, a seeming miracle, like the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is the opportunity of our crises, and the collective heart can be that miracle. For the Global Coherence Pulse and its partner, the Global Coherence Initiative, the greatest contribution we can make to this massive global change moment is to help build those islands of coherence through these planetary pulses. Thankfully, group meditations are nothing new, and thankfully there are many more rising up in response to the world situation. And as Rollin said, much of the heart science isn't new either, having been discovered over 100 years ago. But what is new is the understanding of the agency we each have in creating coherence in the world. What is new is the understanding that we communicate with our environment and that we can consciously use our hearts to help set the thermostat instead of adjusting to the temperature around us. What is new is the collective commitment that we're seeing to intentionally put this new understanding and these new skills into action for creating whole system health and well-being, or whole system coherence, self-social and planetary, and help humanity recognize a higher version of ourselves. On the opening call for Humanity Rising, the founder of TED Talks said that one of the most important things we have to do is to stop speaking to the converted and instead aim at those in the middle who accept the science, who acknowledge the problem, but in daily life act as if nothing's happening, either because they're distracted, overwhelmed, feel powerless to participate in creating large-scale change, whatever reason and without judgment. The Global Coherence Pulse is for everyone, converts and skeptics alike. But when it comes to coherence, it doesn't have to be a massive effort. It's not quantity over quality. Research suggests that small groups of coherent individuals have more power to affect the global field than large groups of meditators that don't have coherence at the core. Hiding beneath the structures of ordinary awareness is our potential for greater coherence. As we say at the Pulse, it's our birthright, but we have to claim it. We're encoded with it, but we have to activate it. And as we've heard, when we do, not only do we benefit, but so does all of life. In fact, astrobiologist Dr. Bruce Damer, whose path-breaking scientific work is in the origins of life, told me that he believes that creating coherence through tools for healing our separation is the most important work of the 21st century, which if we take to heart, really elevates the importance of what we're talking about as a strategy for world change. I think of heart coherence as both a science and an art. The art of heart coherence being the walking, talking, living, breathing embodiment of this understanding and not stopping with the intellectual ideas and thinking, okay, I've got it, what's next? Understanding the science is important and good, but embodiment is where we're going, and that takes practice. Many paths, one destination. There are many kinds of meditations that can lead to the same result, but we can't get to heart coherence by thinking about it. It's like the Aikido master George Leonard used to say, the wind can be howling, but if we don't stop and put up our sails, we'll never catch it. We'll be moving into a pulse meditation with Teresa soon, but remember that the most important coherence we can practice is the moment-to-moment coherence in our daily lives. That's when we'll really recognize its power. But when we do come together, it's worth pondering that Apollo 14 astronaut and sixth man to walk on the moon, Captain Edgar Mitchell, founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, believed that love is the organizing principle of the entire universe. So who knows how far our global coherence pulse may reach. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And I think we'll now just move directly into your meditation, Teresa. Welcome.
Thank you. Gosh, it's so good to be on this call today with you, Jim, and I'm really so excited about Humanity Rising and what you've been doing. And it's a huge commitment on the part of your team to come every day and bring this information forward. So I really just want to say how honored I am to be participating and how proud I am of you and the whole Ubiquity team in pulling this off. Yeah, we've been dancing together for a long time, and Claudia and Jim and Rollin are some of my favorite people on the planet, and here we are, we keep weaving together. So very, very happy about that. And Rollin, as Claudia said, you know, when we lay this out, when we lay out the science, it really, you know, places us in this moment of responsibility where if this is true, then we know what the answer is. We know what our part is, and we can feel that we're embedded in a system that's supporting us to do that in every moment if we choose it. So that's another part that makes it really exciting for us. And Claudia, my partner in the Global Coherence Pulse Initiative, we have been, I think, taken by coherence. There is something about that quote for me early on in my life, and I think the same is true for Claudia. The moment that we heard that, we knew that we were the answer. That we at some point in our evolutionary history, there would become a moment where we would be needed, and that the quality of our presence and the quality of our coherence and what we're feeding the field would have a profound impact on the evolutionary moment and the whole of life. And it is really clear that we are a system that's far from equilibrium, and it's going to take some commitment, and it's going to take practice to rise above the feelings of fear and reaction that's so rampant right now. And perhaps it is this crisis and the pressure that is going to fuel that commitment for us to really step up and to be in that practice. And the Global Coherence Pulse is providing a place for that. I also want to acknowledge as we head into this meditation that it's the summer solstice. It's actually today is the beginning of that. And there are people all around the world, starting right now through World Unity Week and other initiatives, that are beginning a rolling prayer. And so as we do our meditation, we're joining with that huge wave. And that will add our energy into that, and our meditation and our own experience will be lifted up by it. And I heard just yesterday that Buddhists believe that positive actions during a solar eclipse, which is also happening with the summer solstice, multiplies the effect 10,000 times. So this is the perfect moment for us to be pulsing the planet with heart coherence. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on some music as part of it. So I'm going to start that first, and then we'll drop into some meditation time together where we get to spend the next, say, 10 minutes pulsing the field with our love and compassion and gratitude, and really be making a difference. So let's turn on some music. All right. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. So let's just take a minute to just settle down and relax and let go of everything we've heard up to now, and just bring ourselves fully present to this moment. And one of the best ways for us to do that is to place our awareness in the center of our being, in our heart center, and to focus on our breath moving in and out of our heart. And allow the quality of your attention on your breath to loosen any tension or resistance you might be feeling in your mind or your body. Our breath is the only bodily function that happens both automatically and intentionally. And as we bring our attention to our breath and we bring our intention into the quality of energy that's flowing in and out with our breath, we begin to feed the field intentionally with our love and compassion and care. And so let's start this intentional practice by pulsing care and compassion through our breath and through our hands into our own hearts and bodies. Coherence begins inside each of us. And we need to support ourselves and our well-being first and foremost. So let's, for a moment together in silence, send our genuine care and compassion to ourselves. With every breath, feel it nourishing every cell in your body right now. Your heart is the doorway into the infinite field of love and potential. And our breath is the current moving in and out of this field. Now feel the bottom of your feet. And when we're in coherence, we're resonating with the electromagnetic frequency of the earth and her heartbeat and breath. And so through the bottom of our feet, let us send a wave of gratitude for the bounteousness of our Mother Earth. In the vastness of the universe, she is a priceless jewel. And we are so blessed to be living in this garden. So through our breath, we're sending care and compassion to ourselves. Through our feet, we're sending gratitude and love and appreciation for the earth. And in doing so, we come into greater synchronization with her breath and her heartbeat. We can relax into the arms of our mother. And we can draw strength from this feedback loop, this connection. Just consider in the last few months that we have paused from the bulk of our activity on the earth, that she has begun to regenerate herself in an unprecedented, miraculous way. And so let's now connect with her resilience and draw it into us through our breath. Life knows how to ride this evolutionary moment with grace. And now with our energy, sending love and compassion to ourselves, our feet on the earth, sending gratitude and love and compassion to our mother, aligned with her heartbeat and her breath. Let us connect with all of the people around the world right now, sending love and heart coherence into the field. Joined together in coherence, we are vastly greater than the sum of our parts. And our impact is magnified 1 trillion-fold. And now all connected, let's begin to send some frequencies of feeling and energy into the field. And let's start with compassion and care for all of life. pulse it into your home and your garden, into your city, into the countryside. We join with the field of the earth and wrap this planet with our love and care. And now let's summon the feeling of courage. The courage to ride through with resilience whatever comes our way. And pulse this feeling of courage into the field to lift us all. As we continue to breathe through the center of our heart into the field, and from the field out into the planet, back again. Let us evoke the feeling of curiosity, like the curiosity of a child. And that we can open to every moment that is ahead of us with wonder, with joy, with courage, and with love. Blessings to all of life, life on this planet and life throughout the cosmos. Now let's bring our awareness back into the center of our own heart and our breath moving in and out. Feeling the bottom of our feet. Feeling our gratitude to be joined together in this moment to do this essential work on behalf of the whole of life. Just finally, let's send a wave of love to each other. Because we need each other to be able to have sustained resilience and heart-centered coherence. Yes, thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Teresa. It's a little hard for me to speak. I kind of lost track of the plot there for a moment. While I'm kind of regaining my composure, why don't you say a few things about the Coherence Pulse tomorrow? How people can
Yeah,
join.
I'd love to share about a few things, and I just want to say that felt so good. Like, I don't know about the rest of you, but feeling into the field right now with the prayers that are happening. I think there's elders all around the world who are pulsing. Wow, I feel enlivened in a way, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who is on the line today. I could feel our hearts together, and wow. So I'm gonna share my screen again because I put some slides to make that easy to share with you some of the things that are happening, and I'll put some links in the chat. But I need to find. Hang on 1 second. It's like after the meditation, it's hard to do anything, right?
Totally.
But I'm getting there. It's Zoom sometimes, it doesn't let you share your screen. Okay, let's see. There we go. All right. This is what we were doing. Sending this beautiful pulse. I just wanted to acknowledge that the music that I was playing there is from a friend of mine, a couple called Entheo, and I'll put a name in the chat, and it's a brand new one, and it's called The Great Awakening. And I thought it was really potent for our time together, so I'll put that in the chat for you. And tonight there's a global Saturday Night Alive, and I'm going to be doing another meditation tonight, and some Harriman and Peter Russell and a bunch of other people will be on that, and it's a fun thing to join in because it's kind of like a little bit of a, you know, a show with music and energy, and it's a really nice way to celebrate our coherence with our joy. And then tomorrow we have our Global Coherence Pulse, but we're starting the morning in the World Unity Week with an event called Purpose Earth. And we're going to be featured on the main stage following Purpose Earth, and they're going to be putting on an extraordinary presentation for 3 hours with music and visuals from the cosmos and all kinds of things. And it's a fund to begin to collect resources to be able to fund some of the important projects on the planet. And then right after that, on the 12 noon, we're going to have our next Global Coherence Pulse. And the theme for that pulse is celebrating our coherence. And every month we feature a different one of our partners. And this month we're featuring Earth Dance Global. And it turns out that the Global Coherence Pulse is going to be opening for their first virtual music festival called Earth Dance Co-Manifestival. And so when you tune in at 12 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll put links in the chat for all of this, you'll actually be on the Earth Dance TV stage, where we will be able to celebrate our coherence through music and presentations and dance. And then I know, Jim, you guys, Humanity Rising is a big part of World Unity Week. So people can stay in this energy all week long, and there's amazing things happening. So we're literally today, we're joining in the beginning of a wave, the meditation that we did. And tonight, also at 5 p.m., there's a global meditation and prayer. So there is a lot for us to do to support us to maintain this energy for an entire week, which helps us with our resilience. And I'll go ahead and put some things in the chat, Jim, as you close up the session for today.
Well, Teresa, thank you so much. And Claudia and Rollin, what an amazing start to Unity Week. This was the first day. Over the next 7 days, we're working with World Unity Week to promote the various programs that they'll be airing worldwide. As most of you know, this is all happening around the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. 75 years ago, on the 27th, I believe, that the United Nations was founded at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. And so the UN, as you also know, has had a very troubled history. There's been a lot of obstacles in the road to planetary unity and harmony. And the UN has struggled with many of the major issues of our time. So over the next week, as Teresa was saying, wave after wave of celebration and events and happenings are taking place. And Humanity Rising is going to be right in the middle of the mix. And we wanted to start with heart coherence. And so Rollin and Claudia and Teresa, you brought us right into the wave. And that couldn't be a more perfect synchronicity for all of us after our first 30 days. And, you know, Rollin, as you said, you know, that the gravity of this really hits one when one takes in that every thought, every feeling, every deed is information that we're putting out into that field. So everything that we do affects the overall field, not only of the Earth and our solar system, but it reverberates out to the entire universe. That's why Plotinus says the whole universe breathes together. You know, and as you said, Claudia, I thought it was very profound that you know, we think of strategy as doing something, you know, planting 1 trillion trees, implementing the donut economic model, as Amsterdam has just announced that post-pandemic, they're going to turn the entire city of Amsterdam into a city at the center of which is human well-being. And we've spent weeks now talking and listening about what people are doing for a better world. And today we stopped. And you all reminded us that perhaps the deepest strategic action we can take is simply to be with our hearts and to be with each other at this extraordinary moment in human history where coherence is probably the most important word in the world. And to come to the realization, as you've helped us gain today, that the coherence of the heart, which is as simple as feeling your heart and breathing and expressing gratitude. That's the bottom line. And so I just want to thank you and thank everyone. This has been an amazing thing. And I'm hopeful, Teresa, that we can all join the meditation tomorrow at noon Pacific. So that'll be 9 o'clock Central European time. And you see the links in the chat. Please join us. This has all been recorded. It's been broadcast live on Awake TV and about a half a dozen other partner platforms. So we've been going out to 10 or 15,000 people over the last 2 hours. So thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow again, 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. Central European time. And between now and then, feel the wave.
Feel the wave.
Feel the wave. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.